Okay, guys, we're going to knock out the Great Plains region of Texas here. Last one. We've done mountains and basins, we've done coastal plains, and we've done central plains. Now, remember, we did coastal plains and the central plains together in one video, so there's only 3 videos, but 4 regions. So, Great Plains, right here, this kind of weird one that goes through the middle. The reason that it's kind of divided like this is because of elevation. There are escarpments or like almost like a cliff that divides these areas of Texas in terms of elevation. So you go from the Great Plains and then you drop down onto the Central Plains. Then you go across the Central Plains and then you drop down again onto the coastal plains. And then, of course, you would go up into the mountains and basins area of Texas. So it's basically, there's a lump here called mountains, and then there's a flat part, and that drops down to another flat part, and then that drops down to another flat part. So the idea there is that Texas is simply divided by elevation in terms of these regions and the Great Plains. We call them the Great Plains because they stretch out onto that region of the United States, which we call the Great Plains. So the Great Plains in Texas, that region is really part of that region of the United States. So physical features, it is a flat, expansive landscape. There are some canyons and some plateaus, but largely it is flat. The climate and vegetation, it's dry, it's arid. There's not a huge amount of rain on the plains because it's all just short grass prairies. It's grassland. It's the Spanish down here described this area as an ocean of grass when they got out there. These are explorers who had seen the ocean, and they get out onto the plains and they look in every direction and all they see is grass, and they're like, it moves like a wave of in the wind of grass, and they were really like they felt like they were on the ocean again. But then that's why they refer to it as an ocean of grass. And that's a little bit of history part about that. But yeah, it's a pretty arid environment in that it does not rain as much as it does elsewhere in Texas. It is the Great Plains are very fertile soil. They're good for growing crops if you do have enough water. Um, we have to irrigate in that area, which is why we have the windmills. Windmills allow this area and the Central Plains, for that matter, to be settled because there's not a lot of naturally occurring water, surface water, other than in rivers. So rivers are where humans first settle in these areas, all the way back to native groups, and then those groups will spread out, especially with the colonizing of Texas, both by, um, well, primarily by Anglos because the technology arrives at that time. It has nothing to do with this group couldn't do it, that group could do it. It has everything to do with the development of technology later in history, to where you can drill a well and pump water up. Not that wooden windmills didn't exist, but it was difficult to build a wooden windmill with no trees. Um, and that's what you have out on the plains. So let's take a look at some the Great Plains. When you look at them, here you can see in the background some plateaus, this canyon area around it, then there's rivers out there. But again, look at the sides, it's all brown grass everywhere. So everything that lives out there has to survive on the grass or survive by eating something that eats the grass, including the humans that lived there, which led to the way the culture formed of those native groups in that area. So when those native groups that developed there, they developed there because of or their culture developed the way it did because of the resources they had. The primary resource they had was buffalo and hunting those buffalo and learning to survive in those regions. Um, the group that we're looking at here, this is a member of the Apache tribe. There are two groups of Apache. There's the Mescalero Apache and the Lipon Apache. And these two groups, this is a member of the Lipon Apache. Of course, this picture that's highlighted there is from later in the history when they've mastered the use of the horse. They've mastered the use of firearms there, which only made their group stronger over time. And they were already one of the dominant cultures in this area. So prior to gaining use of the horse, prior to gaining use of firearms, they were still a dominant culture in the area. All right, so understanding them, and I'm going to see here. Yeah, we've got a map up here. So when we think of this, this is where you've got the Lipon Apache and the Mescalero Apache in these areas. You've also got the Comanche, the Kiowa extend into there a little bit, and then, of course, out onto the big part of the plains in the rest of the United States. These groups all nomadic hunters of buffalo and competing for that major resource there. And of course, competing with each other. There were many centuries of warfare between these different groups fighting for resources on the plains to survive. And that's what we see in terms of Native Americans hunting buffalo, challenges of settlement there. There are huge challenges to Anglo settlement and later Texas settlement because of those tribes that survived there, and then just the harshness of starting a life there. It is not an easy place to survive without more advanced technologies that can allow you to get water from underground, to keep your livestock alive, to water your crops. Um, Without those technologies, that area will revert back to the ocean of grass. So that is the Great Plains region of Texas. Now, something to remember in terms of all these different regions, you need to know them well enough to be able to compare and contrast. You need to understand how people's lives would be changed by where they lived. So when you look at the primary resource on the Great Plains, you've got Native Americans, buffalo. They're not going to survive by trying to farm out there. It just won't support it without advanced technologies allowing them to get water. So you're not going to be farming out there until you've got those advanced technologies. The issue there is what do you use to survive? Well, you use buffalo versus those groups that are on the Great Plains. If you're on the coastal plains, excuse me, if you're on the coastal plains, then you've got much more resources at your disposal to survive. You've got fish in the ocean. You've got all the wildlife that lives in these piney wood forests and all these other areas. You've got some rolling hills that can support lots of different crops. You've got way more rain. You've got lots more rivers. There's just more resources to survive there. So you need to be able to look at what's in these areas, kind of study how the different groups would have survived. So when you go and study the different tribes, understand how those native groups would have been impacted by their geography, because everything is down to geography. That's something we'll talk about in class. So thanks for listening and have a good one.